Hi, and welcome to Lily Pub. I'm Kathleen Spracklin, one of the founders of Lily Pub, along with Victoria Crowder, the anti-novelist whose book, Zettelkasten for Fiction Writing, is getting into the final stages. I can't wait to get her book. Well, today I've got another author with me, Dave Saunders. And Dave Saunders, his new book, Founders Who Finish, I've got a draft copy, I'm so lucky, is about to come out as well. And he has a very, very interesting story to share with us on how writing and entrepreneurship interrelate. He's been involved in a number of startups, and this is what his book is about, is how can you take your startup all the way to the finish line? And he's doing it again in real life practice, which is going to be the foundation for a newsletter that he's going to have after his book, and probably one or more books coming up as well. So I'm so excited to introduce you to Dave Saunders. Dave, would you tell our Lily Pub audience a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Kathleen. Appreciate it. I actually began my career in the internet before the internet was public. So that was the late 1980s. And I worked a lot with early protocol development. My team actually wrote the first web browser for AOL. We wrote the first web browser for Apple, which was canceled several weeks later. But hey, the check cleared. And we developed a lot of the original software for connecting kind of personal computers to bigger mainframes where our customers who were predominantly defense contractors, they needed to connect to the bigger computers to do their jobs. And so from that, it was kind of a very interesting early experience for me because we really learned how to just connect to those customers and figure out how they needed our products to do their jobs and really what that meant. And it was also an interesting thing because when you look at like your traditional sales and marketing books, they talk about benefits versus features. And when you have a product that is super technical, that's challenging. It's very difficult to actually kind of convey the value of a product that is so deeply technical. And so it was a great place to start. And I moved through the internet industry over about the next 10 years. I was a research manager at Lucent Bell Labs and had the just incredible privilege to work with just amazing researchers with, in some cases, multiple PhDs. My group actually built the first commercial Wi-Fi hotspot. Again, it was a project for Apple. And so that was the little one that looks like a spaceship, if you ever have remember those. And moved on from there to MedTech. And I've been on the development team for 5 different surgical robots, one of which I led the commercialization team for and got FDA clearance for it about 2 years ago. And most recently, I have started a green technology company, and I've been working with the largest B Corp corporation in the world and another very large private food manufacturing company to try to take their waste products as much as they try to be efficient. All food producers do produce spoilage and waste, and they want to try to turn that waste into energy and try to not only improve their own business efficiency, why put waste in landfill if you don't have to, but also they have very strong environmental desires and targets. And so by doing this, we can help them reduce their carbon footprint by eliminating a lot of that waste from going into the landfills or being driven, in some cases, 110 miles to the nearest landfill, which is burning a lot of diesel fuel every day. And so it's been a fun mix, a lot of different businesses along the way.
Wow, that really sounds fascinating. Now, of course, you started this whole new green technology association since completing your book, Founders Who Finish. Is that
Mhm.
right?
That's right. At least the most recent project. I started it about a year ago, which I actually started the book about a year ago too. And there have been a lot of twists and turns with the green tech company along the way, which has been very interesting because it's given me reinforcement for some of the things that I've learned over the past many years So I made sure to convey those in my book as examples, and in some cases inspiration, and in other cases warnings.
What a fascinating thing, because we, of course, we live in an AI age where someone can ask ChatGPT or one of the other AIs, how should you start a business? And it'll practically write a book for you.
Mhm.
And so much so that now people have to file a certification that they did not, use AI to generate
Mhm.
books. But yours comes very organically, speaking, out of your actual experience. And so you are writing from events. So your book
Mhm.
is coalescing what you've been through. And that comes through really clearly in the fascinating stories that you share. And that I love your light style in writing this book. It's encouraging, it's humorous, but it gives a lot of dangerous situations that to look out for. So it's
Mhm.
very, very practical while being
Oh, thanks.
being great fun to read. But I'm fascinating now with you were almost saying the last time we spoke that you were writing the book and the newsletter, and you were kind of going to step back into a more peaceful, family oriented life and not get caught up in the rush of the startup. And I thought to myself, this fellow with his capability and his background, how long is that going to last? So tell me more about what was the transition? How did you what made you decide to dive back into
Mhm.
the hustle bustle of actually trying to make a crazy idea happen?
Sure. A lot of what I've done has actually been based on kind of early technology transfer projects. In fact, my very old internet company was based on taking Telnet software from the University of Illinois, UIUC in Champaign-Urbana, and we took public domain Telnet software and we turned it into a commercial project. 10 years later, Netscape, NCSA Telnet from the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, went through exactly the same story. It was pulled out of that university and turned into a commercial product. And so I love that kind of interaction. I love working with universities. I love working with raw technology. And about a year ago, I was approached by some associates that I knew, and they had been working with an inventor that had developed a carbon capture system. And the idea was that this would be able to capture CO2 from the air and turn it into actually plastic. It would embed the CO2 into a recycled plastic material and so permanently sequester it there. And that plastic, probably not good for food use, but it would be usable for artificial decking and kayaks, and there'd be plenty of uses for it. And so it was a very interesting technology, and I was kind of looking at it and I was interested, but I was providing a kind of a guidance role for it. And as we talked to different potential customers, we found that the technology wasn't going to be very scalable. In fact, we're actually seeing this problem right now. There's a very large CO2 capture system built in Iceland, and they came out with a news article recently indicating that it has possibly 3 times the carbon footprint of what it is capturing. And this is because of just a bunch of unfortunate logistical issues. And that's actually something that's always been a thing for me. In my history, which is sometimes looks like a big quilt, I also owned a business incubator in the late 1990s, early 2000s. And one of the things that I would always talk to new startups about was I said, okay, you probably have every scenario about failure worked out in your head. What happens if you're wildly successful? What happens if you do get 1 million users overnight? Or what happens if your new, Internet of Things teddy bear suddenly becomes so successful that every toy store in the world places an order for 1 million bears? Can you make them? How do you actually ramp up? And sometimes you'll get these glib responses of, oh, that'd be a great problem to have. Well, actually, it could be a problem that could end your company. Filling up can be a very, very difficult thing. And sometimes it's just that human resources issue of can you even hire enough people fast enough without breaking your company culture, without just creating chaos through management. There's all kinds of issues there where success can actually be the biggest source of failure compared to all of those doomsday scenarios that you might have. And so this became something that we've started to be very concerned about, that to build this device, it created logistical issues that wouldn't scale with the potential benefits. So we kept talking to the potential customers, and the roads led to a number of very large food manufacturing companies. And so we started talking to them. And it turns out that a number of these, actually pretty much some of the largest food manufacturing companies in the world today, have very, very ambitious carbon footprint reduction goals. They want to be zero carbon footprint by 2025. And even if you're one of those people that doesn't quite believe in climate change or whatever, if you even just look at carbon footprint from a business efficiency standpoint, if you start to evaluate the greenhouse gases that you're releasing, why are they being released? Think of them as wasted output. You've got molecules going into the air. Why aren't they going into a product? Why aren't they being used in some way? And if you're dealing with milk-based products, think of a cow as a giant chemical factory. And the more efficient you are with what the cow produces, the more beneficial that can be to your company, just from a financial standpoint. And so as we looked at these goals, we looked at these decarbonization goals, we realized that to help them decarbonize, maybe it wasn't about capturing CO2 from the air, but it was actually capturing it in their business processes. And so we began to slowly morph and pivot the company and have developed a plan for basically doing waste to energy. And so the cows, as you can imagine, if you have a business where you've got 200,000 dairy cows under you, you actually have a lot of waste products just managing the cows themselves. And you can only spread so much of that on the ground as fertilizer. And some of it isn't actually very usable. In one case, one of these farms has 14,000 cows, and they have 30 tons a day of rejected feed. Their food, eventually, as you go through the course of the day, it gets mixed with, schmutz and sand and bedding material, and the cows will just refuse to eat it. And this happens on any farm. But when you start to get a farm where you've got 14, 15,000 cows, that small amount of rejected feed every day now adds up. That's 30 tons a day. And you can't really spread that in the field because it'll attract rodents, and it doesn't work very well. And so we have decided to take all of that material, all of that waste material, and I'm currently in the process of building a refinery, and it will take all of that as input. And out on the other side, we will be producing renewable diesel fuel. And if we compare renewable diesel to fossil fuel diesel, just the production of it, renewable diesel has an 80% lower CO2 footprint compared to fossil fuel diesel. And now you may immediately ask, well, then why doesn't Exxon or Chevron, why aren't they making this? And the part of the reason is logistics. If you're Exxon, you're dealing with billions of barrels of fuel. And if you can get that straight out of the ground, that's a relatively straightforward logistical issue. If you have to drive around Kansas to collect literally hundreds of thousands of tons of manure a year, it's a completely different business. That's not Exxon, that's not Chevron. So it's a completely different human resources model. It's a completely different logistics and delivery model, but it's a very interesting one because we now have this potential of creating renewable diesel, selling it right back to the farms. Again, this 14,000 cow farm is using over 300,000 gallons of diesel fuel a year. And a few years ago, that diesel fuel hit $6 a gallon. And there's no way that kind of spike in your expenses will not affect everything. And it's amazing where dairy ends up in our food supply. I mean, it's, cheese and your pet food, the extra protein in your dog and cat food is coming typically from milk solids. And so it hits everything. And if we're taking manure and rejected feed, which has effectively a zero cost, and we can turn that into it, molecularly, it is the same as diesel fuel. So there's no difference. It's the same molecule. So we turn that into diesel fuel, but we have a much flatter expense. So even if fossil fuel diesel goes back to $6 a gallon someday, we would continue to be able to sell at a guaranteed price, which is great for the farms. So it's kind of one of those think local solutions. It would be very difficult to scale this up and compete with Exxon, which is why some of the executives from Exxon are actually business advisors to us because they're like, you're doing a great thing. They love what we're doing. And from a more cynical, pragmatic standpoint, we don't really interfere with what they're doing because we can't. They're different worlds. And so it's a really fascinating thing. And we got here by listening to our customers. In many scenarios, you could describe how we got started, and we hit kind of a roadblock, we hit a brick wall, we did a little pivot, we hit another brick wall. You'd get to a point where you would assume that most companies would have just like thrown in the towel and given up. But instead, we really just kept listening to the customer and going, what are we really trying to solve here? And how can we help you solve that? And so we took the expertise that we had and we took the knowledge and the resources that we had until we really found a solution that was going to solve their carbon footprint problem. But at the same time, the secondary benefit is that we're now going to save them money and we're going to take excess waste off of their hands. This one farm, their nearest landfill is 110 miles away. That's a lot. That's a big distance for a daily dump truck run. And so we don't take up landfill space. And we eliminate that as a problem. We eliminate the problem of having to drive all this waste to a landfill. So we solve a lot of problems that are really all one problem, but they kind of all had a common North Star. And it was a lot of fun. And it really came down to listening. So now I've got the challenge on my hands of building a 10 million gallon a year diesel refinery, which sounds big, but it's actually small. And which is still kind of blowing my mind a little bit, but it's a fun challenge. It's going to be a really interesting thing to get into and building a team and dealing with logistics and new kinds of safety issues that I've never had to deal with before. So it's a lot of new stuff for me to learn and to manage. But I think it really fits into kind of my love of finding strange, stones and turning them over and going, no, there's actually a little diamond embedded here. And really taking what's kind of fledgling raw technology and turning it into a real product and an offering for a customer. And that's what I love to do it. And so it's something I'm trying to teach through the book, but it's something that I guess I can't resist doing it myself.
Oh, this is so fascinating because when you talk about all of the different projects that you've been on, from telecom to surgical robots, now to diesel fuel, this is probably the first time that you've had a real risk that your whole thing might literally blow up on you.
Yeah.
Whole different set, but yet the mechanism is the same. The pitfalls are the same in whether did you listen or didn't you listen. And I was also thinking as you talking about Exxon, and you're saying that, well, your 10 million barrels a year is laughable to Exxon for the billions that they deal with. However, even though your operation may not be scalable, it's certainly replicable.
Mhm.
Wouldn't want to scale it all. Okay, Kansas is going to be the state that collects waste from all over the country. That would be ridiculous because then you'd be trucking the waste thousands of miles. But rather, once you build up this model and show that it works and that you get a tight relationship between your customers and your vendors, where what your vendors are selling you is something that they have to normally have to pay to get rid of.
Right.
You're collecting it at essentially zero cost other than the trucking. You're already relieving them of that cost and that burden and opening up their purchasing power and then selling them what they're already buying at a reduced cost under a contract, knowing that they're going to be able to continually buy it at about the same price.
Yeah.
It's a very spectacular model and helping the environment
Mhm.
all at the same time. It's pretty amazing. So then this model that you've built could then be replicated at different sites in the country and serve different markets.
That's the plan, and even taking this worldwide, we've already had a few countries approach us and ask about developing these refineries in their areas. And it's as of this morning, it led us to a really interesting conversation about waste products from certain crops.
Oh,
So, coffee, which I love, a lot of people don't really think about what coffee looks like when it's being grown. And there's what's called a cherry. There's a meat around the coffee bean that we actually do want. And then all of that cherry, all of the fruit material is pretty much waste. And we have actually some of our investors own extremely large coffee plantations in South America, and they have this significant waste problem in terms of what do we do with all of that fruit? And again, you can only grind it up so much and use it as fertilizer because they're producing so much of it. And so we're now looking at the possibility of altering the way this refinery would work to take that kind of input material, and again, we would just build it locally and pop these up almost as a franchise, right? And really refine them to whatever those particular waste products are. So it's a really interesting opportunity, and yeah, you do solve a lot of problems, and it's when you look at the environmental impact of what fuel really requires, it is quite amazing. I mean, even these fineries, which I now have to build one of my own, where do you put it? And one of the first things I kind of like slammed my fist down was I said, it's not going to go on land that can grow a single blade of grass. I need to find land that is not, at risk of being disturbed if something goes wrong. And even still, I mean, refineries operate extremely high temperatures, extremely high pressures. Even if we operated for 20 years without a single leak of any kind, it's still not an area where you're going to expect a lot of birds and insects to hang out. So I wanted to make sure that we're only using property that has a limited ecological impact, and yet it still has to be accessible by roads and all these. So there's all these like little balancing acts that you have to deal with in terms of where does it go, and logistically how do we get what we produce back to those customers. And you hit the nail on the head. There's kind of a maximum size to what we want to build anyway, because if I built 100 million gallon a year refinery in one location, now it's going to be I'm going to end up having to truck that fuel even further away, because even this one farm that's local, 340,000 gallons a year is what they use. So if even the 10 million gallons, that already means I've got to find more customers for that fuel. And so being able to distribute these smaller refineries around the country, utilizing local sources of waste, becomes just a really great opportunity. And then, leave Exxon to do what they do. They've got an incredible distribution network even still, but there's a lot of little niches that can be filled with a solution like this.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, boy, it sounds really, really exciting. Now, you are also, as part of the book that you're writing, Founders Who Finish, you're going to be publishing a regular monthly newsletter
Mhm.
as well. So I'm picturing, of course, that you're going to develop quite an interested audience because of your past successes.
Mhm.
Anyone who buys your book and joins your newsletter, are they going to also have a community? I know I have a newsletter, and Lily Pub is my community, and anyone who subscribes to my newsletter gets to be a member of Lily Pub. Are you going to have something similar to that?
Yeah, we'll have an online community for people to talk about the different challenges of being a startup founder, entrepreneur, fundraising, operational challenges. Anytime you start a new business, it turns out that there's probably 20 new things you have to learn just to get the thing moving forward. And so being able to pull together resources from people who can say, hey, I can give you some pointers there, being able to share that information is going to be very valuable in kickstarting anyone's individual business. So we're gonna bring together a community just to help provide that kind of entrepreneurial support for folks, mastermind calls and the ability to do kind of like internal pitch practice, that sort of thing, all in the name of just helping people shorten their path to success.
That sounds pretty astounding. And then my brain immediately goes to, you have some pretty high-powered investors that are and clients and customers, people with a lot of resources and capabilities who are associated with you and viewing your success and viewing how your path to success works so well. If they're looking for where else they could put their money to work, wouldn't they be inclined to look at uh, the your publications of your members,
Mhm.
the pitches that they make for their products and their startups might give them a very pre-cultivated
Mhm.
group of entrepreneurs that they know have already been well trained in how to do a startup right, would be a whole lot warmer set of, well, where are we going to go with our money to help startups get going than just grabbing off somebody who wants to, build a slingshot to the moon. Because they're already a group that's past muster in your
Mhm.
community. So
Yeah, that's definitely what I hope for. When you're dealing with just kind of the investor community, there are different flavors of investors, and you need to model your pitch according to those audiences. And those are different groups that I have spoken to at great length. So I mean, over my career, I've done thousands of investor pitches. So that's something that I hope to be able to share with folks as well. But being able to get through some of those kind of unspoken rules of, there are certain investment communities that hate the word safe note. And so if that's your investment vehicle, they're going to slam the door on your fingers. And usually I'm surprised at how many people don't know that until it's too late. The words have come out of their mouth and you can see on the pitch call the investors just going, I will never do a safe note in my life. And there's reasons, there's just different reasons for different kinds of investment vehicles, and they work in some environments and they don't work in other environments. Some investment groups actually love crazy high risk investments. It's what they thrive on. And then you have other venture capital groups that are looking for something that is completely de-risked. And in the case of your own company, there might be a couple different ways to pitch it where it actually looks attractive to those different risk models. It's just a matter of how you describe it. And so being able to understand those kinds of things and being able to understand how to differently convey your business, or if you're not looking for investment money, knowing how to get your business over the humps that it's inevitably going to hit without having to get out VC money, that's important as well. Certainly, one of the biggest phrases that I used to use at my incubator was, revenue is the best form of venture capital. Uh, and being able to get yourself into a position where you've got actual income coming in, as opposed to having to give away chunks of your company for investment capital, that's a great opportunity if you can. I've been in situations where that's literally impossible. When you're doing med tech, I can't pre-sell. I can't do pre-market clearance until the FDA says that I may. And so in those situations, I have no choice but to deal with venture capital groups because I have nothing to sell legally until the FDA says I can. And so I've been in different high pressure situations where in some cases revenue is not even an option. And when you're completely beholden to the venture community for your dollars to pay paychecks, it changes your plans. It changes how you build your business structure and what your roadmap looks like because you still have a customer. They're just it's a different flavor. And so you need to be able to show them results in a way that you wouldn't normally have to, show how the sausage is made to a more traditional customer, for example. So again, it's just these understanding who your audience is and understanding who your stakeholders are can really help you accelerate your business. And those are the kinds of learning lessons and experiences from my own past doing startups and being at very large companies and in some cases having to do I was at one company where doing I've described it as going Willy Wonka and just closing the doors and nobody saw sight of the company for almost 9 months and then they opened the doors back up and the product that they came out with, which was the result of one single customer discussion. Both this company was about to go bankrupt, and they had one very fortuitous discussion with a major customer. Closed the doors, went Willy Wonka with the last of the money that they had, opened the doors, and that became a product that literally built the internet that we know of today. And that product did not exist in any other form. And it's amazing to me to think that that whole sequence of events only happened because somebody was listening and somebody had a vulnerable conversation with their existing customer and said, we may not be here 3 months from now. We're done. We're out of money. We're not making enough money from selling products. We'll put the source code for the products that you have already bought into escrow. So you'll be able to do whatever you want with it, but we're done. And that conversation went ... And they were like, well, what if you did this to the product? And that was the pivot that they made. And it turned it into a brand new product that literally built the backbone of the internet. And those are amazing things. And I think they're bold moves, but they're also moves that require a little bit of vulnerability that often people don't feel comfortable making. They feel that you're supposed to have a certain facade, you're supposed to give off a certain appearance as a company when you're talking to your customers or your prospects or whatever. But sometimes just having an honest belly to belly conversation as I've called them in the past, those can be the most important conversations you'll ever have. And so, in my newsletter as well as in my book, I try to share some of those stories from my own personal experiences. And well, as you know, there's a lot more stories come out of me. It's fun. I really have been lucky in my life to have just had so many crazy experiences that in some cases have involved skidding my knees awfully hard. And in other cases have just been just rocket launches and just to be in the presence of some of those people who have just exploded and to have been part of that team and to learn from what that acceleration of business looks like is incredible because ultimately you end up getting to touch a lot of people's lives. I know I'm kind of darting around here, but when I look at the internet and when I look at what we've built to create this giant network, to me, I see it as people coming together, for better or worse. But I prefer the better part. And it's incredible how many people have been able to find each other and meet each other. I literally got a wedding invitation to somebody that I only knew online, and I went to Australia for a wedding
Wow.
from somebody that I only knew online. And that's something that was brought together by technology that ostensibly was created as a Cold War project. I mean, it's kind of glossing over some of the details, but really the internet was designed to connect together nuclear missile silos.
Mhm.
A little bit more than that, but that's largely what it was for. And to have it have become this giant meeting place for people and to bring people together, it's exciting to me. And I love to find technologies like that. And even with what I've done with surgical robotics, it's I see it in the same way too. There are surgeries that are possible because of technologies that I've been a part of. I'm not a robotics expert, but to be able to create a product that allows a surgeon to reliably operate on a fetus that is still in the womb is just amazing to me. Life-altering miracle surgeries that technically they can be done today, but the number of surgeons capable of doing those surgeries, you could count on your hands. And to create technology that now makes it possible for hundreds, if not thousands of surgeons to reliably do a procedure that only dozens could have done before, that's an amazing thing. And I love that. And honestly, it doesn't have to be big, high-reaching technology either. I've seen people build space savers for closets that are just modifications to hangers where I'm just like, that's awesome. You just saved me an incredible amount of closet space. I don't have to throw away a whole bunch of shirts. Those are things that touch people's lives, little gadgets like that. And it's just, I love to see, I love to see people be able to take a vision and to really touch someone's life out there with what they made and what they created and to be able to reach people with those solutions through the internet, find your audience of customers so much more easily than door-to-door salesmen selling vacuum cleaners. I mean, imagine we've come from that, and that's a great thing. I love that.
Yeah. Well, that's fantastic. And before I let you go, though, may I wrap you back around a little bit to the writing process
Oh,
itself
sure.
for our Lily Pub audience, because you did just complete a book, Founders Who Finish, and that was quite a writing project to take
Hmm.
something from real life into and actually create a book that will soon be available. And Lily Pub folks will let you know when it's available. We'll put a link out there, so if you want to jump on it and get Dave's book when it comes out, we'll surely let you know. Could you tell us a little bit about the actual process of converting all of this experience that's every which way in your brain, which we all face as writers. We've been there. We know it. We know it like the back of our hands. We could pick one corner and talk for an hour. But how do you take all of that stuff and turn it into a coherent book?
It's tough. At least I found it very challenging. I wanted to have a kind of a natural progression and flow, and I'm at that age where I still am very analog in many things, but I also do feel comfortable digitally. And so the first thing that I do, honestly, is mind mapping. And to me, I find those to be the most kinesthetic experience in terms of developing my thoughts and trying to create those connections. And so I do have a piece of software that I like for mind mapping, but I also do just grab a piece of 11 by 17 paper and colored pencils. And I just start with a central idea and just start drawing branches, sub ideas, and I can draw connector lines. And so I can really literally map out my thoughts. And from there, that's probably still too much of a mess to turn into a book. I don't know, maybe if I got some more practice specifically in that area. But then what I did was I did in fact turn it into a series of index cards. And so I was able to then take those branches. So for me, the branching process with the mind map, it feels the most natural to me because it allows me to be scattered, but in a structured way. I'll be kind to myself by saying that. And so I can be a little bit frenetic and I can be a little bit off the map, but there's a structure to it. So I have this playground with a mind map. And so for me, it's a great way to get started. But then I have the branches. So now each of those branches can associate with an idea on a card, and then the sub branches can now be associated with a sub card. And so now I get to have a little bit more structure. And then I get down onto a big table and I start to now more formally go, okay, what really does make sense is chapter one. And so now I can start to lay those cards out and create a bit of a structure. And from there, I kind of have a split brain on this. I feel very comfortable with a word processor. And it's just because, my first experience with a word processor, I was, I think, 9 years old. So it's been in my blood long enough that I'm okay with it. But sometimes I will find myself getting a little bit too antsy and wanting to edit. So I do have a very large stack of legal pads. And so if I find myself not being able to resist editing as a type, which I believe is probably one of the most dangerous things you can do. Even I have won a technical writing award for a book I wrote on TCP/IP, which is the Internet Protocol. And even back then, I did learn the dangers of editing while you type. And so if I find myself not being able to resist, I just grab a pad, I grab a favorite pen. Yep. And I even have uh, I even have a Levenger clipboard. So I allowed myself to be luxurious, and I got a nice fancy leather
Gorgeous.
trimmed clipboard.
I
There we
know.
go. That works. And then I've got my yellow pads, and so I just pop it in there, and I just find a nice quiet place to sit, and I write, and then especially these days, there are so many great tools that will then allow me to just sit back and read what I wrote, and I'll get perfect dictation.
Ah,
Years ago, there was like Dragon Naturally Speaking for Macs and Windows, and personally, I found that using that for voice dictation, you would get more accurate results if you just took off your shoe and beat it on the keyboard.
yeah.
And yet I kept buying every single version. So frustrating. But now ChatGTP or Rev.com, there are so many tools out there, some of them for free, and you can just sit back and just read what you've written longhand, and you'll get a perfect transcription. Copy that into your editor, and now you can do the editing process. But what I really strove to do was to just keep a natural voice, having cut my teeth in technical writing and doing so much work with research groups like Johns Hopkins. It's very easy to shift into a very stuffy, formal,
Yeah.
color by numbers style of writing, and it's not very accessible. It has its place. It certainly is appropriate in certain areas. But for this kind of book, I just wanted to just kind of have it be like this. I wanted it to be, coherent, but have personality to it. And so I ended up breaking a lot of writing rules. As you know, I've got a lot of one sentence paragraphs because it just made sense to read it that way. And so when I finally got to that editing process, I really strove to make something that I felt I would be able to very naturally take a copy, stand in front of a mic, and record an audiobook version. And I wanted something that felt like I was actually saying it. And so it's a little bit less formal than a TED Talk, which I feel would still be a little bit more rehearsed. But I do feel like I was able to really convey kind of a structured narrative, and it just takes a bunch of steps. But yeah, for me, it really began with mind mapping, but then shifting to I am sufficiently analog. I've tried Obsidian, I've tried a lot of those tools, and I find that they just become just black holes.
Yeah.
I can very easily produce content into these digital note-taking systems that I will never find again. And so there's something about that kinesthetic experience with physically writing. It also gives me an excuse to play with different pens. So I've got fountain pens and I've been developing a collection of fancy inks
Oh, wow.
that I really love. So and so, I guess there's always an opportunity for play no matter what. And I think that's important. I think the creative process, his name is thrown around way too much. Nihai Csikszentmihalyi, who wrote the book Flow, which is a great book. But sometimes it becomes a walking cliche as well. But I do feel like that overall theme in his writings is very accurate, that the more you allow yourself to relax into a process,
Mhm.
the more will come and the more relaxed you will feel. And I think that's why I do recommend for most people, unless you really, really know that you can feel natural at a keyboard, I think writing is the most logical thing to do because it is difficult. Even if you've got erasable ink or you're using a pencil, erasing a word is very, very different than editing while you type, right? And so they're not even the same process. It's just not even the same thing. And so I feel like you can get into a better state of flow. I can take, batteries never run out for a notepad. Um, and if I ever have a pen that actually runs out of ink before I lose the pen, it will be a miracle. So, or before one of my kids steals the pen. And so having a pen and having a piece of paper, having a legal pad, it's an easy thing to do. It's easy to then just pick up and go somewhere, walk down the streets. I live on the waterfront, and so being able to go down there, find a bench, find a comfortable place to sit and write 2 or 3 pages, that's an easy process to do. Finding a space where I can sit down with my laptop and not have glare from the sun, or just the distractions create themselves when it comes to using a laptop or a tablet. And I'm not so much into like seeking out like a manual typewriter. I'm going to skip that stage. It's just I've been there and that's fine. I'm fine with word processors, but I think just having that process of flowing ink onto paper is incredibly valuable because as you said, it's so easy to go to ChatGTP and ask it for what are ultimately surface level answers, which are sometimes useful. I'm not gonna say that tool is not interesting, but it does lack the nuance. It does lack that personality and experiential nature that come from real people writing from their experiences, writing from their perspective. Do I know what it's like to build a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate with offices around the world that sells retail and delivers in 24 hours? No, I don't. I don't know how that works. I don't have that experience, but I do have a lot of experience turning around companies that were just completely skidded and stalled out. I've taken technologies from multiple sources. I've worked with researchers. I've worked with grant processes. I've worked with lots of VCs. I do have those personal experiences, and those things I can share. And I feel that what I have to share has far more depth and utility than kind of the surface level, statistically correct answers that you would get from a chatbot. Again, it's not a bad place to start. 10 years ago, we were complaining about people using Wikipedia as a place to get that first level of knowledge. And if you stop there, you're not doing yourself a favor. But Wikipedia has citations to primary literature. If you follow those citations and learn how to actually start to read research or read the primary sources, you can start to learn way beyond what the article says. And so even the growing up period that we've experienced on the internet has developed a certain depth and nuance. I don't think people complain about Wikipedia like they used to 10 years ago. And I think it's very useful. I think it's a great source of information, and you can find connections and sources to articles and people that you're trying to research or topics that you wouldn't have found anywhere else. And I think that's great. I think it's very, very useful. We'll get there with the chatbots at some point, but I don't see them ever truly replacing shared experiences.
Yeah,
So it's, they're tools and they're tools. And I hope that my content that I'm producing will be seen as a useful tool for someone's toolbox as well.
terrific, terrific. And talk about shared experiences. It's been wonderful to share this time with you, and I've enjoyed it very much. So thank you so much for joining me on LilyPub. And if you're interested, folks out there at LilyPub have wonderful conversations. Our fusion writing gives you an opportunity to try your own fledgling writing out. Obviously, Dave isn't doing fledgling writing. His book is about to come out, but we've really enjoyed talking to you. And thank you so much.